Not immediately. When they made the film a year or two later, yes, they asked me to come out there. In the meantime, I had also done room service.
For decades, Eddie Albert was the smiling face America thought it knew. A gentle comedian, a beloved actor, the man who made millions laugh without ever stirring controversy. But behind the curtain of Hollywood charm lay a story so extraordinary, so dangerous, that it was hidden for more than 30 years. Behind the sitcom charm was a man who slipped into shadows, carried secrets across borders, and stared down horrors most of us could never imagine. He lived two lives, one for the cameras and one the world was never meant to see. And when the truth finally surfaced, it shattered everything we thought we knew about Eddie Albert. The wholesome public persona Eddie portrayed. For more than 3 decades, Eddie Albert occupied a singular place in the American imagination. To the millions who watched him on television and in film, he was the embodiment of warmth, decency, and gentle humor. His face was familiar, his presence a comforting constant in a changing world. Hollywood and the mainstream media had carefully cultivated this image, marketing him as the quintessential good-natured suburban sidekick, the kind of man who could be trusted, who would never cause trouble, who seemed to exist outside the realm of conflict or controversy. This public persona was built on a foundation of carefully chosen roles. Albert built a massive television and cinematic footprint, playing characters who were amiable, slightly befuddled, or intensely optimistic. He avoided direct conflict on screen, preferring instead to navigate the world with a bemused smile and an unwavering belief that things would work out. His characters were the kind of men who inspired affection rather than admiration, who made audiences feel safe rather than challenged. It was a formula that worked exceptionally well, and it made him one of the most recognizable faces in American entertainment. The industry's presentation of Eddie Albert was not entirely honest, however. Early studio press releases and biographical directories frequently listed his birth year as 1908, a deliberate effort to make him appear younger than he actually was. The truth was that he was born Edward Albert Heimberger on April 22, 1906, in Rock Island, Illinois. His mother had altered his birth certificate years after his birth, not for vanity or professional advantage, but because his parents were unmarried when he was born. The alteration was an attempt to conceal a fact that carried significant social stigma in that era, and it would be only the first of many instances in which the public record diverged from the private reality. The circumstances of his early life were far removed from the comfortable suburban existence he would later portray on screen. Moving to Minneapolis as an infant, he began working as a paperboy at just 6 years old, not for pocket money, but to help support his family. The Heimberger household was not wealthy, and every contribution mattered. During World War I, his real German surname became a source of torment. Schoolmates aggressively taunted and physically harassed him as the enemy, a xenophobic reaction that was common in the United States during that period. After graduating from Central High School in 1926, he studied business at the University of Minnesota. It was during this period that he attempted to launch a career in radio broadcasting, but his plans encountered an unexpected obstacle. Announcers repeatedly mispronounced his surname on air, calling him Eddie Hamburger. The humiliation was persistent and public, and it forced him to make a difficult decision. He permanently dropped his surname and adopted his middle name, Albert, for professional survival. The stock market crash of 1929 arrived just as he was completing his education, and it completely wiped out his post-college corporate business prospects. He was left destitute and unemployed, a young man with no prospects and no safety net. To stave off starvation during the Great Depression, he survived on a string of grueling, low-paying, odd jobs. He worked as a door-to-door insurance salesman and a nightclub singer trying to earn tips from patrons who had little money to spare. He even worked as a circus trapeze flyer, a job that required physical courage and offered little financial security. These were not the experiences of a man who had been handed an easy life. They were the experiences of someone who had learned to fight for survival. His performance style developed rapidly in the mid-1930s when he moved to New York City. The city offered opportunities that the Midwest could not, and Albert found success in co-hosting radio shows and landing major Broadway roles. His breakthrough came when he was cast in the hit stage play Brother Rat, a role that would change the trajectory of his career. The play was a success, and it brought him to the attention of Hollywood studios. Warner Brothers signed him and brought him to Hollywood, where he made his official feature film debut in the 1938 movie adaptation of Brother Rat. The film starred him alongside a young actor named Ronald Reagan, who would later become President of the United States. The role immediately codified his typecast image as a charming, wholesome secondary lead. He was not the hero in the traditional sense, but he was the kind of character audiences loved, the friendly face that made the film feel warm and inviting. His television career reached its absolute highest level of public recognition from 1965 to 1971, when he starred as Oliver Wendell Douglas on the massively popular CBS sitcom Green Acres. The show was an absurdist comedy about a wealthy Manhattan lawyer who buys a farm in the fictional town of Hooterville, determined to live a simple agrarian life despite having no practical farming experience. His television persona became an instantly recognizable pop culture staple. Beyond television comedy, the industry recognized his dramatic capabilities. He received 2 Academy Award nominations for Best Supporting Actor, first for playing the carefree, Vespa-riding photographer in Roman Holiday in 1953, and later for his role in The Heartbreak Kid in 1972. These nominations confirmed that he was not merely a television comedian, but a serious actor capable of depth and nuance. To the public, Eddie Albert was exactly what he appeared to be: a warm, decent man who had earned his success through hard work and talent. But the public did not know the full story. Behind the wholesome image, behind the charming characters and the Academy Award nominations, there was a secret life that Albert had carefully concealed for 30 years. And when the truth finally emerged, it would force a reassessment of everything the public thought they knew about him. The secret life Eddie Albert hid. In 1941, Eddie Albert's rising Hollywood career came to a sudden and catastrophic halt. Movie mogul Jack L. Warner, the ruthless chief of production at Warner Brothers, discovered that Albert was engaged in a passionate extramarital affair with his wife, Ann Page. The discovery enraged Warner, and his response was swift and devastating. He immediately canceled Albert's movie assignments, blackballed him from finding work at competing studios, and actively sought to ruin his career. The studio head had previously pulled him off a picture as it was being shot and kept him under contract, primarily as a way of preventing him from getting other work. Facing the wrath of one of Hollywood's most powerful men, Albert had no choice but to flee California entirely. The exile from Hollywood took an unexpected form. Albert relocated to Mexico, where he officially joined the Escalante Brothers Circus, a prominent traveling show. Using the athletic training he had acquired during his Depression-era days as a circus performer, he blended in perfectly as a professional clown and high-wire trapeze aerialist. To anyone watching, he appeared to be simply an exiled Hollywood entertainer touring rural Mexican territories, a man who had fallen from grace and was making a living the only way he knew how. But the circus employment was not what it seemed. While the public and his fellow performers viewed him purely as an entertainer, Albert was reportedly operating under the direct payroll of the U.S. Army intelligence. His entire circus career served as an elaborate cover story, a carefully calculated disguise that allowed him to move through Mexico without arousing suspicion. The man who had been forced out of Hollywood had found a new calling, one that would prove far more consequential than any film role. During scheduled breaks in the circus itinerary, Albert would rent private boats and initiate what appeared to be innocent pleasure sailing expeditions and fishing trips along the strategically vital waters of the Baja California Peninsula. These excursions were not vacations. They were intelligence-gathering missions with a specific and urgent purpose. Posing as an amateur photographer, Albert quietly mapped out and photographed German U-boats that were using secluded, unpatrolled Mexican harbors and coves to refuel and resupply. The war in Europe was escalating, and German submarines were operating far closer to American shores than most citizens realized. His intelligence work extended beyond tracking U-boats. Albert successfully collected critical hydrographic data and surveillance intelligence on Japanese nationals operating in the region. He discovered that operatives posing as local commercial fishermen were actually military surveyors, mapping out the Baja California coastline to prepare a potential backdoor invasion route into the United States. All of his findings were systematically routed directly back to the American government, providing crucial intelligence that helped protect the nation's western approaches. Following the formal entry of the United States into World War II, Albert officially enlisted in the United States Coast Guard on September 9, 1942. In 1943, he was discharged to accept a direct commission as a lieutenant in the Naval Reserve. By this point, he had already starred in 17 major feature films. He was highly famous and well past normal draft age. He could have easily accepted a safe, stateside public relations assignment, the kind of duty that celebrities were often given to boost morale without facing combat. But Albert explicitly demanded active frontline duty. In November 1943, Lieutenant Edward Heimberger, serving under his legal name, was deployed to the Central Pacific as a salvage officer aboard the USS Sheridan during the brutal Battle of Tarawa. His strict, explicit standing orders were to command a Higgins landing craft to recover abandoned military equipment and gear from the shoreline. The mission was logistical, not combative. He was not supposed to be on the front lines. The assault plan failed catastrophically from the start. The initial invasion force had miscalculated the tides, and the heavy landing craft could not cross the low-lying coral reefs that surrounded the island. This forced waves of heavily geared Marines to exit their boats more than 500 yards away from the actual shoreline. Trapped waist-deep in the open ocean with zero defensive cover, over 150 Marines became completely stranded. The elite Japanese shoreline fortifications systematically attacked. What should have been a landing became a slaughter. Realizing what was happening, Albert completely abandoned his assigned salvage mission. He made a deliberate choice to disobey his direct military orders. Steering his small, unarmored Higgins boat directly into the concentrated crossfire, he transformed his vessel into a rogue rescue vehicle. Exposing himself fully to enemy fire on the water, he actively hailed and gathered several nearby hesitant landing craft. He orchestrated a continuous, highly organized evacuation loop directly under difficult circumstances. Through sheer defiance, Albert's individual boat directly pulled 47 severely wounded Marines out of the water. His direct leadership and tactical coordination oversaw the successful extraction of 30 additional men who would have otherwise died. For his extraordinary valor, battlefield initiative, and conspicuous bravery, the United States military decorated him with the Bronze Star Medal featuring the Combat 5 device. The citation recognized his defiance of orders, his willingness to sacrifice his own safety, and the lives he had saved. But the war did not end at Tarawa. Albert spent the next 3 days on the island, helping the Marines and coordinating the delivery of ammunition. When asked about the experience decades later, he would say very little. The memories were too heavy, the losses too great. But he would also say, with quiet certainty, that the day he served as a landing craft commander at Tarawa was the accomplishment that meant the most to him. The war had taken him from the Hollywood studios to the fields of the Pacific, and it had revealed a man far different from the amiable sidekick the public knew. Eddie Albert had spent years hiding his true life from the world. But the Battle of Tarawa was only part of the story. The psychological toll of what he had witnessed and done would follow him for decades, and the challenges he faced after the war would prove almost as difficult as the battle itself. Eddie's post-war psychological battles. The war that had forged Eddie Albert into a decorated combat hero had also left him deeply scarred. The sheer trauma of the Tarawa incident, the desperate rescue missions under enemy fire, all of it remained with him long after he returned to civilian life. The physical wounds were measurable. He returned from the Pacific Theater with permanent, localized partial hearing loss caused by heavy explosions, a reminder of the chaos he had endured. But the psychological wounds were far more difficult to quantify and far more persistent. He suffered from a severe case of combat fatigue, a condition that would later be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder. The nightmares came with terrifying regularity. Violent dreams that transported him back to the fields of Betio Island. He would wake in a cold sweat, the sounds of war and the cries of wounded men still echoing in his ears. These nightmares did not fade with time. They persisted for the rest of his life, a constant reminder of what he had witnessed and what he had done. He never fully escaped the war, no matter how far he traveled from the Pacific or how many years passed. In 1946, seeking career independence from the restrictive major studio system that had once blackballed him, Albert founded his own independent production house, Eddie Albert Productions. The company specialized in producing 16mm industrial documents and educational films aimed directly at public school children. It was an ambitious venture, one that reflected his growing interest in education and his desire to create content that mattered beyond mere entertainment. The company produced 2 highly progressive clinical films on human biology and reproduction, most notably Human Growth in 1947. The film became the first reproductive health education film ever screened inside American public schools, a pioneering achievement that brought him both recognition and controversy. The film opened in a living room with a respectable middle-class family, showing a boy asking his father questions about the human body. The scene then launched a family discussion about intimacy, designed to demonstrate that the subject could be discussed casually and decently. Then came a schoolroom sequence showing a film within a film, an animated cartoon that explained reproduction with simplified diagrams and a minimum of anatomical detail. The reaction was immediate and fierce. Conservative school boards and religious groups accused Albert of corrupting the youth, sparking massive, aggressive local backlashes. A 1950 review in Time magazine noted that Oregon had taken a bold step in sponsoring a film that candidly brought before mixed adolescent audiences the truth about menstruation, reproduction, glands, and growth. But the boldness was precisely what made it controversial. Educators at the time judged the film inadequate in many important respects, but its very existence was a landmark. Albert had pushed boundaries, and he paid a price for doing so. The early 1950s brought a different kind of crisis. The Red Scare swept through Hollywood, and Albert's wife, the highly talented Mexican-American actress and dancer Margot, became a target. She married Albert in 1945, and by the early 1950s, right-wing anti-communist organizations had set their sights on her. Her name was officially published in the notorious anti-communist pamphlet Red Channels, a publication that effectively blacklisted individuals from major film, television, and radio work. The pamphlet listed many prominent actors and artists who were alleged to have been connected to communist organizations. The sudden loss of Margot's income placed the household under immense financial strain. According to testimonies from their son, Edward Albert, the only reason Eddie himself was not blacklisted or ruined alongside his wife was his untouchable public status as a highly decorated, authenticated World War II combat hero. The Bronze Star with Combat 5 device served as a shield. The studio executives who might have dropped him were unwilling to go after a man who had saved 47 Marines at Tarawa. He had earned a level of respect that transcended the politics of the moment, and that respect protected him when others were not so fortunate. His wartime experiences did not simply fade into memory. They mutated into something else, an aggressive, unyielding lifetime crusade against environmental destruction and corporate pollution. Albert openly discarded the polite academic label of ecologist, frequently appearing on national late-night talk shows, to angrily label himself a human survivalist. He launched direct, unfiltered attacks against the U.S. Department of Agriculture, accusing the agency of prioritizing corporate profits over public health. He spent years personally financing and leading intense political lobbying campaigns to expose the devastating ecological effects of industrial pesticides. Rachel Carson's 1962 book Silent Spring had sounded the alarm, but Albert took the fight directly to the public square. By 1969, while starring on Green Acres, he was speaking out against DDT at rallies and public events. He addressed a Stanford University rally for the inaugural Earth Day on April 22, 1970, a date that was also his birthday. In a CBS News report that evening, he warned the audience to protect the planet at all costs. His dedicated activist work served as one of the primary driving public forces that successfully forced the United States federal government to pass a national ban on the pesticide in 1972. There was a profound irony in all of this. While the global public laughed at his television character's absolute incompetence at farming on Green Acres, Albert was actually a highly sophisticated organic gardener in his private life. He completely transformed his multi-acre Malibu estate into a functional, eco-conscious organic farm, long before organic agriculture became a mainstream commercial trend. The man who played a city slicker who could not manage a simple farm was, in reality, one of the most committed and knowledgeable organic farmers in California. The gap between the public persona and the private reality could not have been wider. The psychological battles he fought after the war were not only about trauma, they were about purpose. He had seen the worst that humanity could do to itself, and he had emerged determined to make the world better. But the question that haunted him, the question that would drive the final chapter of his life, was whether he had done enough. And the answer, as he would eventually reveal, was more complicated than anyone imagined. Why he kept his secret hidden. For more than 3 decades following the conclusion of World War II, Eddie Albert consistently refused to leverage, mention, or discuss his wartime heroism in press junkets, studio bios, or public interviews. The man who had saved nearly 80 Marines under enemy fire at Tarawa carried within him a profound and quiet survivor's guilt. He firmly believed that highlighting his own survival and medals was deeply disrespectful to the hundreds of Marines who did not survive the reefs of Betio Island. When he finally spoke about the experience on camera in the 1990s, the anguish he carried nearly 60 years later was still palpable. In one particularly heart-wrenching interview, he described encountering pinned-down Marines, offering to load them up and pull them out. Their reply was simple and devastating. They told him to simply bring back more ammunition. He did as requested. But when he returned, he found that they were all dead. As he described this moment, he dissolved into tears. A man still haunted by the sacrifice of his comrades and tormented by the thought that he could have done more. Albert later confessed that during the peak of the tragic incident on Batio Island, he made a solemn private pact with God. If he were permitted to survive the crossfire, he would abandon selfish, commercial Hollywood vanity and dedicate the remainder of his life entirely to humanitarianism, global relief, and the preservation of human life. This pact shaped everything that followed, from his educational films to his environmental activism. The weight of that promise was carried quietly, without public acknowledgement, for decades. He did not speak of it. He did not use it to advance his career. He simply lived it, day after day, year after year. The truth about his heroic actions only reached the general public in the late 1990s. Military historians and television documentarians investigating World War II naval logs independently unearthed the original, highly classified 1943 combat citations filed under his legal name, Lieutenant Edward Heimberger. When a documentary on Tarawa brought the story to light, Albert was forced to finally speak about the events on camera. Even then, he remained dismissive of his own heroism, directing all praise to his fallen comrades. To him, the Bronze Star with Combat 5 was not a badge of honor, but a reminder of those who did not return. He had saved lives, yes, but in his mind, the lives he had saved were eclipsed by the lives he could not save. The reluctance to speak about his heroism was not the only secret Albert kept. His entire life was a study in contrasts, a public persona that bore little resemblance to the private reality. The man who played an amiable sidekick had led a rescue mission that defied military orders and saved scores of lives. He had hidden these truths not out of shame, but out of a profound sense of humility. He did not believe he was a hero. He believed he was simply a man who had done what any decent person would do in the same circumstances. In his twilight years, Albert was diagnosed with severe Alzheimer's disease. The condition that had claimed so many memories began to take hold of a man whose memories were already too heavy to bear. His son, successful actor Edward Albert, chose to completely put his own booming Hollywood career on hold for 8 consecutive years, stepping away from the industry entirely to act as his father's full-time primary caregiver. The devotion was absolute, a quiet echo of the selflessness his father had shown on the beaches of Tarawa. The son, who had grown up in the shadow of a famous father, now gave up his own fame to care for the man who had raised him. On May 26, 2005, at the advanced age of 99, Eddie Albert passed away peacefully from complications of pneumonia at his home in Pacific Palisades, California, with his devoted son right by his side. He was laid to rest at the Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery, a resting place that holds the remains of many Hollywood legends. But Albert's legacy was not measured in box office receipts or television ratings. It was measured in lives saved, in environmental protections won, and in the quiet example of a man who had seen the worst of humanity and dedicated himself to the best. In a tragic turn of events, his son, Edward Albert, was diagnosed with advanced lung cancer shortly before his father's death. He passed away just 16 months later, on September 22, 2006, at the young age of 55. The son who had given up his career to care for his father was gone, leaving behind a legacy of devotion that mirrored his father's own. The Albert family had given much to the world, and the world had taken much from them in return. Following his passing, the United States Marine Corps and veteran organizations issued profound public tributes. They stated explicitly that while the civilian world would always remember Eddie Albert as a brilliant comedy actor who could not outsmart a farm animal on television, the United States Marines would eternally honor him as the fearless hero who repeatedly drove an unarmored boat to save his comrades. The man who had hidden his heroism for 30 years could no longer hide from the truth. And the truth, once revealed, was far more remarkable than any role he ever played. He lived a double life, yes, but not in the way the public might have imagined. The double life was not one of deception. It was one of extraordinary courage hidden behind a mask of ordinary pleasantness. And when the mask was finally removed, what remained was a man who had given everything he had to everyone he could, and who had asked for nothing in return. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.